Hey, I'm Sam and I do design, and in the video today I am doing a Q&A based on my new lighting design, Encore. I've partnered with 3D printed lighting company Gantri, who is based out in San Francisco, America, and they make 3D printed lights made from non-GMO, corn-based, plant-based plastic, and I'm really excited to be able to partner with them again. After my first light, Weight, was launched in 2018, I am back in 2020 with Encore. The design process for this light has taken over a year, and way back about 1 million years ago in 2019, I did a design series on YouTube called Design in Process, and that started to show the beginnings of the process for the design of this light. Each week I was taking on a different challenge to trying to design the light, and I realized after making a few videos that I wasn't quite good enough at YouTube yet to be able to simultaneously film and edit YouTube videos whilst also designing a light that I was proud of. So I decided to stop that series and focus entirely on the light itself. So a little bit of background about Encore, if you don't want to watch that series, is this light is inspired by theatre, it's inspired by theatre curtains, and that also translates over into curtains in the home as well. So the whole idea is that I think cloth really changes how we interact with light, whether it's in the theatre and you're waiting for production, or light shining through your window in the morning, curtains play a really important role. Like I mentioned, this is my second light with Gantri. My first one was Weight, and even though I think they have completely different visual languages, they both share some really important similarities. What I'm trying to do with both lights is really play with how we can make rigid materials like the plant-based polymer that Gantri uses and make them seem soft. So in the case of Weight, I wanted to make the base look as if it had been squashed. And in the case of Encore, I really want to get that theatre curtain ripple effect around the side of the light. Really early on in the Design in Process series, you can see me really trying to be literal with how I'm translating the cloth onto the light. And I even went as far as simulating cloth over objects in computer programs like Blender. But somewhere along the process, I realized that I really needed to be a lot more abstract and symbolize curtains without necessarily making you think, oh wow, that's a pair of curtains in that lamp. So what I did was make this really geometric pattern running all the way around the lampshade, and I really think it strikes a balance between being minimal, clean, but also once it gets pointed out to you, you can kind of see the inspiration behind it as well. So that was a little bit of inspiration behind Encore. Now let's get into the questions from Instagram. First up here, we have how many prototypes were there before you made the final one? And that is a really interesting question, and we need to talk about model making and prototypes to answer it. So when you're gonna prototype a design, you need to think about fidelity. And fidelity is how close it is to the final product. Now, that is always a trade-off with the time it takes to make that prototype. So really early on, you're going to have low fidelity, but really fast and quick models. And an example of that is really early on, I actually was just printing out one-to-one scale models, just sheets of the CAD, the computer model that I had. And I was really just looking for the pleat sizes and things like that. This was back when I thought the whole design would have the cloth shape as well. And then later on, as I moved into the design that we know today to be Encore, I was even printing out things like this. Now they're really great to be able to see as a one-to-one scale model. You can put them on the desk, you can kind of see how things are gonna look. And in terms of these printouts, I probably had 20 to 30, maybe more. And they're all in this folder here, which I'm keeping all of my prototypes in. That's another thing that's really important as well, which is storing the prototypes. Having just 2D printouts mean that I can store so many in this folder and not need to worry about space. But once I knew that I was on the right track, I could start to print out some smaller models, scale models. I think this was half scale or something like that, to try and figure out what the shape might be. Now, the reason why I'm doing it at smaller scale at that point is, again, time. It takes a lot longer to print out big models than it does to print out smaller models. And I had a few of these smaller models, and even this one I think was a 3rd scale before going up to full scale. But again, lowering the fidelity when I move up to full scale so that I can get things done really quickly. This paper model probably took me an hour or 2 to make, whereas if I wanted to print the whole thing as a 3D printed model, I think it took about a week. So just to make sure all the proportions are right, just to make sure that everything was looking good, I made this paper model to try and get the model out there as fast as I can. And then after that, we can bring over the final model. This was a 1-to-1 model made on the 3D printer that I have here. And this was the first time that I actually saw the lights in person. What I was actually doing throughout the whole prototyping stage was actually rendering each light in KeyShot. Now, what that was doing was allowing me to see how different lighting environments are going to affect how this pattern looks. So the idea being that people have different windows, people have different lighting in their homes, and it's all going to affect how the pattern looks. It's never going to look the same as it does in a computer modeling program. So I actually think that I had more prototyping and simulations in KeyShot than I did in real life. Again, just down to time. Once I had an environment set up, I could just really quickly import the new iteration of the model, see how the light is affected by it, and then I can take the process from there. Okay, that was a long answer to the first question. We're going to move on really quickly now. So we have a couple of questions here about design restrictions and about manufacturing. And Gantri are really quite good at this aspect of the design. So the way that it works is I have complete free reign over the design. And what I need to submit by the end of the process is a model that can be 99% manufacturable. So what the engineers at Gantri are then going to do is refine and really help with the manufacturing process, but they're not going to change the outside of the design. We call that the A surface in industry. And essentially that's all to do with the design intent. So they knew that they couldn't change anything on the outside, but anything on the inside they could change. But that doesn't mean to say that I didn't have to think about how this thing was going to be made. I really had to think about the print orientation. So when you print in 3D printing, Gantri say that I'm not allowed any overhangs and any support material. That is really bad for business. It's bad to remove that support material. It's really bad for the surface finish. So you have to make sure that the design can be printed in the correct orientation without any support material at all. Because let's not forget that when you're printing something and you're trying to print in midair with no support underneath it, it's just going to fail the print, and the bead of plastic that's being extruded is just going to fall to the floor, and you'll lose that layer essentially, and then any layer on top of that will just become a complete mess. So you really have to figure out the internals to pass that over to Gantri so that their internal engineers can really refine it. After printing a few models like this, I was confident that it could be printed without any support material at all. But we also need to talk about things like tolerances. And actually, this model has great tolerances at this scale with no primer and no paint, which means that everything slides and is really quite nice to use, really quite satisfying to click that into place. But when you start to increase the scale of it, you start to add things like primer, paint. You really need to hone in on those tolerances to make sure everything that needs to slide past each other can slide past each other. And the reason why this part in particular needs to slide is because you need to take the lamp apart to be able to change the bulb inside. So that was really important to get that right. And the reason why it can't twist is and screw off is because actually this isn't a circle. It's actually what we call a super ellipse, or in the industry we call it a squircle. It's not quite circular, it's not quite square, it sits somewhere in the middle, and we just call it a squircle. And it looks a little bit like that. So a few people were also asking how I actually came up with the idea itself and why I went on to pursue something like this. And I think that with a company like Gantri, it's a great time for me to design something that It's as simple as I just want to own it. I just want to have that particular product. Now, my day job is working as a design consultant at a design consultancy, and we work with third-party brands and other brands other than ourselves, and we have to make sure that we can design in their style. Now, when it comes to Gantri, that is a great opportunity for me to be able to think, you know what, this is something that I want to own, and hopefully other people want to own it as well. And because of that, I even made sure that all of these printed models and all of these paper sheets would fit on my bookshelf when the final design came to it. I thought, if I'm going to make a light from scratch, I might as well make sure it fits in my living room. And I'm pretty sure that this is a shelf that a lot of people own, so that if it fits in my shelf, it's going to fit in everybody else's shelf as well. Now, of course, I couldn't be too selfish about this and make it only for me and nobody else. And that's partly why I decided to be a little bit more abstract with the pattern as well. For example, I think that this geometric pattern running all the way around the light is going to be something that someone really appreciates just as an object in itself. And it doesn't draw the eye too much, and it doesn't scream that it's inspired by theatres too much as well. But when someone points out that it is in fact inspired by theatres, that is the point that I think it should become obvious, and not before then. So what the goal was to make something contemporary and minimal, but have the underlying meaning behind it as well. So those have been some of your questions answered. I've tried to answer multiple questions in one go, so let me know how I did in the comments below. And also, if you're interested in seeing a Design in Process Season 2, where I might go into the actual modeling stage of this, the prototyping stage in more detail, let me know down in the comments below, because I feel like I left that season at just a cliffhanger. I didn't really end it. And if you're interested in seeing how I actually went in and designed this, instead of just a Q&A like this, let me know, because I would actually really like to dive back into all of these files and see how I made it. Encore launches on the 10th of November, and it's available in the USA and Canada, which means unfortunately, if you don't live in those places, you're going to have to find a pen pal that can buy a light for you and ship it out afterwards. I'm really excited to start seeing Encore out in the wild, and if you do pick up an Encore light, don't forget to photograph it and post it to Instagram, tag me and Gantri, because we would love to see it. And if you learned anything in this video, don't forget to comment down below, because I love hearing about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell button and everything else that YouTube asks you to do. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye.